Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the October 17, 2019 regular meeting of the Lincoln Way Community High School District 210 Board of Education. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance as you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mr. Janik?
Here.
Ms. Janice Doyle? Here. Mr. Kirky?
Here.
Mr. Lucine?
Here.
Mr. Lucetti?
Here.
Mr. Costa?
Here. Okay, at this time, I'm going to swear in our new member, Mrs. Stokes. We have the Honorable Judge Lloyd James Brooks here to administer the oath. Your Honor.
Yep. Sure.
Actually, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Take just a moment. My name is Lloyd James Brooks. I'm a circuit court judge, and I am Deidre Stokes' former law partner. And I just wanted to congratulate the board on making an excellent decision. I've known her for a number of years. Her integrity is unapproachable, and I think that the school district will certainly benefit, the children of this school district and the young people in this school district will certainly benefit from having her here, and I'm honored to be the person that gets to swear her in. So with that, Stokes, are you ready? All right. Deidre Stokes, do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Lincoln Way Community High School District 210 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of your ability?
I will. I will.
Do you further swear that you will respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets?
I will.
Excuse me. Do you further swear that you shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board while respecting the privacy of students and employees?
I will.
Do you further swear that you will recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting, and you shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels?
I will.
Do you further swear that as part of the Board of Education, you shall accept the responsibility for your role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district? You shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for the Lincoln Way Community High School District 210. That you shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. That you shall strive to ensure continuous assessment of the student achievement in all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law. And that you shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students and its community schools to advance the vision for Lincoln Way Community High School District 210. And you shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district towards fulfilling the vision of the board as it has been created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
I will.
And congratulations.
Welcome to the board, Mrs. Stokes.
Thank you.
Moving on to our student council presidents. Anybody want to go first tonight? If not, do I get to pick?
I don't know.
Okay, there we go.
Good evening. These past few weeks have been great for the Knights. We closed out our homecoming week with a fantastic dance, having over 1,500 tickets sold. In other news, we are elated to send our boys and girls golf team off to state today, as they both placed in the top 3 at their sectional to qualify. Also, we are so proud of our boys soccer team and the final record of the current season of having 13 wins and 4 losses as they head into playoffs. This year, the soccer team has had their longest winning streak of 12 games in a row. We wish all teams the best of luck as their seasons conclude. New this week, the shirts for this year's senior class are being distributed, and thanks to the hard work of our senior class officers, they look amazing. As we close out the month, Student Council has been preparing for the biggest community event that we host, Halloween night. This indoor trick-or-treating event is held inside the building, where the cost of entry is 1 canned food item to be donated to the New Lennox Food Pantry. Last year, we had over 1,000 trick-or-treaters come through and made a sizable donation to the pantry. We are so grateful for the contributors among the community who have donated, as well as the clubs and sports around the building sponsoring a door to help Student Council make this event happen. This is where the idea of community helping community comes to life, and watching the event unfold is remarkable each year. We hope to see you all there. Lastly, we have the SWSC Student Council Conference coming up, and this year it is the Lincoln Way School District's turn to host. This event will take place on November 20th, and we are excited to lead the event as we meet the other student councils in the conference. Right now, we have lots of planning underway, and we can't wait. Thank you, and go Knights.
David? Oh, no, go ahead.
Erica.
Good evening. The Warriors have been very busy recently, and it definitely shows with all of the activities and events that we've had and that are planned in the near future. West had a very successful homecoming week this year. The week started off with our largest homecoming Olympics yet. Over 1,000 students and 100 staff members participated. Throughout the week, the halls were full of spirit. Every day, countless students and staff members went all out for our 80th theme. On Friday, we had our homecoming assembly with amazing performances and fun games and competitions. We also had our largest dance in school history. Over 1,500 tickets were sold, making it a great way to end the week. This month, our PPS department has been hosting a College Changes Everything month. To prepare juniors for the PSAT yesterday, a practice test along with review sessions were available to students. Also on Wednesday, teachers and students wore their favorite college shirts in conjunction with the JJC College Fair. The West Gazette has posted their October issue. This month includes articles from alumni and teachers, and even an article written by me about homecoming week. These articles are all accessible on the West website. Several of our clubs and activities have been attending SWSC conference events recently. Student Council is also preparing to host a conference with the other Lincoln Ways for schools in our conference. Future Business Leaders of America recently went to Gatto's for an etiquette dinner. There they learned numerous skills from conversation starters to good business etiquette, and even a few tips from the owner Frank Gatto. Our fall sports are starting to come to an end, and many teams have celebrated the hard work and dedication from their seniors by hosting senior nights. Several of our freshman advisories worked with their Warrior Way leaders to make scarecrows and enter them in the Village of Manhattan's contest. Tomorrow, West is recognizing their AP scholars. These students are celebrating their achievements by having a lunch at Gatto's. Students in the fall Pride and Prejudice have continued to work hard and are ready to show it off on October 24th, 25th, and 26th at 7 p.m. Next week, Lincoln Way West is hosting a We Are Warriors Week. This week is in coordination with Red Ribbon Week and is planned to promote positive decision making. Each day has a specific theme that goes along with making positive choices. Monday, staff and students are wearing jerseys to team up against bullying. On Tuesday, we are wearing active wear to be active in making good decisions. Wednesday, West is joining students across the nation by wearing orange and taking a stand against bullying for National Unity Day. Thursday, we are wearing red to promote a healthy and drug-free youth. On Friday, we are doing a We Are Warriors Friday, and staff and students are wearing West spirit wear to show the choice is ours to make it a great day. Lincoln Way West has some exciting things planned for the next few months, and we can't wait to see it all take place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shoes. They come in many sizes, designs, and prices. But at the end of the day, they all have one purpose: to help make a journey from point A to point B a little bit easier. Well, Board of Education and those in attendance today, by the end of my speech, I hope to bring you along a journey of what East has truly been up to. Before any good journey can begin, we must have a starting point. Our starting point today will be September 21st, 2019. the date of Lincoln Way East homecoming. This year's homecoming at Lincoln Way East was nothing short than amazing. Roughly 2,100 kids took the first step in a fun-filled year by attending East Circus-themed homecoming. For the night, the students danced away in a moment they will surely remember for the rest of their lives. The success of our homecoming is in short thanks to our student council sponsors, Mr. Pearson and Mrs. Render. Those two put in countless hours to make sure that everything went off without a hitch. Stepping away from homecoming and into the month of October, many spooktacular events/initiatives have taken place. The first being Hats Not Hate. One of our Griffins, Lainey O'Boyle, had a great initiative to bring to East. She, as well as her club, We Dine, passed out 2,800 handmade and knitted blue hats to the student body to support an anti-bullying movement. During the first week of October, the students walked around in their hats with pride to show that East has no room for bullying. Her impact to the school has truly shown how one student can start a journey that can change the lives of so many. Now, while many journeys have beautiful moments, many like Lainey created, many have bumpy ones. One of our fellow Griffins, Peyton Bruns, was injured in a hockey match that resulted in him having to be hospitalized for spinal injuries. Peyton was temporarily paralyzed. To show Peyton support, on Friday the 4th, during the football game versus Lincoln Way Central, the theme was made jerseys. It was amazing to see many Griffins pull out their jerseys to show Peyton support and to wish him a fast and easy recovery. Peyton has now gained feeling in his body and is starting to walk again. Now, before our journey comes to an end here today, I must inform you on what the Griffins will be walking into. Next week, the Griffins will be participating in Mix It Up Day, where they are encouraged to mix it up and sit at a different lunch table to help meet someone new. Additionally, the Griffins will be asked to wear a shirt of a club that they are in. We are very excited about this initiative and hope that all of our students participate. Moving away from October and into November, the Griffins have yet again another month full of excitement. On November 18th to the 22nd, the Griffins will be hosting a friendly competition in Student Council's annual Silver Turkey Drive. During those days, the Griffins will be asked to bring in toilet paper and paper towel rolls during the first hour class to be donated to the Frankfort Township Food Pantry. The winner of the competition will be walking into a Student Council-sponsored breakfast during the first hour. Everyone is excited and we can't wait for the drive to happen. And now, sadly, all journeys must come to an end. Thank you everyone who embarked on this Lincoln Way journey with me. I cannot wait to tell you what East has in store for you next meeting.
Thank you very much. Moving on.
Thank you.
Public comment, we have one speaker signed up this evening, Kathy Matthews.
Hi, I'm Kathy Matthews. I spoke to you last year. I live here in Frankfort. I'm a retired teacher, and I have my youngest daughter went to Lincoln Way East, and my grandchildren will hopefully be going to Lincoln Way East. And I'm here as a member of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'm so appreciative of the wisdom that you showed last year by voting against the Resolution 1 for arming teachers. I'm here to speak out again against Resolution 1, arming teachers and staff, that will be brought forth for a vote by the IASB at a conference this November. Our school buildings are meant to be places of learning and a safe place for our children. The presence of guns in schools adds an unpredictable element that puts educators and students at increased risk and layers even more safety concerns on top of the heavy responsibility already placed on teachers. I understand that there's frustration and emotions that would make people want to arm teachers, but there's no evidence that arming teachers will make schools safer. Even some of the most highly trained law enforcement officers in the country, those of the New York City Police Department, see their ability to shoot accurately decrease significantly when engaged in gunfights with perpetrators. The notion that a teacher with less training would hit an active shooter is unrealistic, and there's the risk of unintended injuries to students and school employees. Your teachers are willing to die for your students, but we don't want to kill them. we don't want to be armed. America's teachers, school safety experts, and law enforcement oppose arming teachers. The American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, and the Major Cities Chief Association, and the American Medical Association have expressed opposition to arming teachers. Instead of bringing more guns into our school, we need to ensure that we are bringing less. Every year, hundreds of American children gain access to irresponsibly stored firearms and unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else. We also know that incidents of gunfire in schools, that 78% of the shooters obtain the guns from their homes or the homes of relatives. So let me repeat that 78% of those guns are coming from their home or the relatives. We don't want them coming from teachers' desks. There are programs available, such as the Be Smart campaign, that focuses on the importance of conversation with adults regarding responsible gun storage and community awareness. You can go to besmartforkids.org for more information. We also need threat assessment programs, particularly for active shooter incidents, because there are warning signs. These are things like the red flag laws that we can do to make our children safer in schools. Arming teachers is not one of them. We all agree that something needs to be done to reduce gun violence and protect the lives of our children. School safety experts, teachers, law enforcement, and medical professionals all agree that arming teachers and bringing more guns to school is not the answer. I urge you to make the same wonderful and wise decision that you made last year to vote against this resolution. My heart is so happy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on, curriculum and instruction, Dr. Feary.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So tonight's curriculum and instruction update comes from one of our major focus areas for the school year, social emotional learning, and is an update on one of our goals, which is to enhance curriculum with social emotional learning standards, and more specifically, to bring social emotional learning concepts and ideas to our students through our ASSET program. Just to review, our ASSET program comes from the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets. The idea is that the more assets that a team possesses, the more likely they are to grow up healthy, caring, responsible adults. There are external assets such as empowerment and constructive use of time, and then there are internal assets such as commitment to learning and positive values and identity. The social emotional learning standards are very similar, with self-management and awareness as internal and social awareness and relationship skills as external. Therefore, as you can see on our asset plan for the school year, it was a natural fit to combine and connect both the assets from the Search Institute and the social emotional learning standards. For example, in September, the social emotional learning standard of self-management connects to the asset of responsibility. And so much of the programming during the months of September and October has revolved around these ideas, which I'll share with you in a moment. As you can see for the rest of the year, November and December will focus on social awareness, including service to others and being positive peer influence, and the rest of the calendar continues to make these connections in similar ways. As I mentioned, some of the programming related to the asset and social emotional learning thus far this year has included At East. They started with the See Something, Say Something initiative, as well as a lunch and learn for the entire staff on signs of suicide for teachers, followed by the, as you've already heard about, the HATS, Not Hate, anti-bullying campaign. At Central, their Self-Care September started with a National Suicide Prevention Week with every student attending presentations on how to take action to prevent suicide, followed by Optimistic October, full of mindfulness and anti-bullying workshops and messages. At West, they also began with See Something, Say Something, reminding our students that our schools are full of trusted adults that they can certainly count on. As you can see, so far our social emotional goal is off to a great start in all of our schools, with thanks to both our asset teams and our PPS teams. And I just wanted to take another moment to mention that our career fair, our second annual career fair, will be on October 30th at Lincoln Way Central from 8 until noon. Students from all 3 Lincoln Ways will have the opportunity to meet with over 28 unions, trades, organizations, and companies with entry-level career building opportunities for our students. I hope you all can take a moment to stop by. Thank you.
Thank you.
2018-2019 audit reports.
We have with us Dave Meyer and Katie Napier from Warner Rogers.
Good evening.
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for having us out to present the financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2019. My name is Dave Meyer. This is Katie Napier. I'm the partner on the engagement, and Katie is the manager on the engagement. And we are out to do our field work back in August, and we're here tonight to talk about the audit and the results. Let me just kind of go briefly through what we do when we perform an audit. Not everyone understands what that entails. You're required to maintain records of your financial activity. Most of that comes in your computerized general ledger system, and what we do is we take a look at those records, transactions you recorded, and we try to determine whether or not they're accurate. And we do a lot of testing. We don't look at every single transaction. That would be way beyond, that would be cost prohibitive, if you will. But we sample expenditures. We make sure that those were for school district business. We look at payroll, test people, make sure they're making what they're supposed to be making. We look at your assets, cash balances, investments, make sure that those are supported by bank statements and bank reconciliations. We look at debt payments, make sure that all those debt payments got made on time. On the revenue side, we're looking at property taxes, make sure that the taxes got recorded correctly in each of the funds that you have. We also look at grant revenues. We get a lot of grant money from the state of Illinois. We verify that those were recorded properly. We do special testing on federal grants as required by what's called the Single Audit Act. And all of the numbers that you see in the financial statements really are basically review for you. You've seen all these numbers before. It's really just a culmination of 12 months of activity added up together into one document. The staff did a fantastic job of getting us everything we needed for an audit. There's a lot of documents that we have to look through, a lot of records, a lot of transactions. Brad Kaufman, Kelly Lozo, the whole team did a great job in providing us everything we needed for the audit, so you should be very proud of their actions. I'll go through some of the pages. We're not going to go through every single page. Obviously, if you have any questions about anything, ask. If we can help out with the answer, we certainly will. You have several documents that are the result of the audit. There's the annual financial statements. There's a couple of letters that come along with it. There's also what's called a single audit report, which is audit of grants. So what I'll start with is what's called the annual financial report. And I believe you have either a hard copy or electronic copy. And you can see in the table of contents, there were 89 pages this year. So there's a lot of information in here. I'm going to focus on several pages. First one being page 1 through 3 is what's called the Independent Auditor's Report. And this is on our company letterhead, and here's where we say, we have audited your financial statements. And you can see that at the very bottom of page 1, opinions, we say, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. The modified cash basis financial statements of the district. So I mean, you can read, it takes us 3 pages to say, we're giving you a clean opinion on your cash basis financial statements. If you don't want to read all 89 pages, I would suggest looking at pages 4 through 11. That's the management's discussion and analysis. This is where balances from 2019 get compared with balances from 2018. It's a good place to go, again, if you don't want to necessarily go through the whole document. I'm going to move forward to page 12, which is the statement of net position. And here you see a column called governmental activities. What that really is all of your funds, the funds that you're used to seeing, education fund, operation and maintenance, transportation, etc. All the balances are added together here. This is as of June 30th. And then on top of those balances from the funds, we've got capital assets, the buildings and equipment of the district, and then also the debt. And you see that the cash and investment balances was $24.9 million at June 30th. And what I want to point out down below in the liabilities, there's about the middle of the page, there's tax anticipation warrants payable, and you're down to $1.75 million. I took a look back at 2016 to see where you were then, and you had 20 million of tax anticipation warrants outstanding in 2016, and your total liabilities in 2016 were 307 million, and you can see you're down to 263 million right now. So that includes the tax anticipation warrants and the bonds that are outstanding. So you've lowered your long-term debt by $44 million in the last, since 2016. I'm going to move forward to page 16 and 17. On 16, you'll see the statement of revenues received, expenditures dispersed, and changes in fund balances. And this is a high level, again. You see that column called general fund, and the general fund here is made up of 4 of your funds that you're used to seeing. It's the education, operation and maintenance, working cash, and court. Those 4 funds added together equal the general fund. And you see down at the very bottom, the fund balance at year end was 10.7 million. And again, back in 2016, it was negative 6.3 million. So we've had a positive $17 million gain in the general fund since 2016. Moving forward, beginning on page 20 and going all the way through page 54 are what's called the notes to the financial statements. These are all required disclosures. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, they're the ones who set the rules and say if you have cash and investments, you must disclose those items in your notes, and you have that in here. If you have capital assets activity, that has to be in your notes to your financial statements. So all of these notes are required by accounting standards. I'm not going to spend much time on those. You can certainly read those at your leisure. The next page I'm going to jump forward to is on page 75. And this back in this section is where you see all the individual fund statements. So you've got what your final budget was, what your actual results were, a variance, and then what happened in 2018. So you can kind of go through and see, okay, here's where we were last year, here's what happened in comparison to our budget. The one thing I wanted to point out on 75 was about in the middle of the page, there's an area called debt services, and it says debt service interest on short-term debt, tax anticipation warrants, and you can see your actual was $155,000. So that was the interest you paid on those tax anticipation warrants. Whereas last year, you paid almost $230,000. So quite a bit different. And I know there's plans at some point the tax anticipation warrants will be zero. You won't have to pay any interest on tax anticipation warrants. And you can see that the education fund, the fund balance at the very end of the year, at the very bottom of that page, 4.3 million, and it was $377,000 at the beginning of the year. So you had a net gain of $4 million in the ed fund during fiscal year 2019. I'm going to jump way ahead now to pages 86 and 87. And this is the schedule of assessed valuations and now your tax rates and your tax extensions. And one thing I wanted to point out here was the equalized assessed valuation. If you look on 87 in the year 2009, the assessed value was $4,058,000,000, which was actually just a shade lower than 2008. 2008 is not pictured here because it's more than 10 years ago. But you can see that the EAV had gone down every year until 2014, and now you've had an upswing of 4 years of positive growth in the equalized assessed value, and you're almost back to $4 billion, which is almost near your high water mark, which was back in 2008. And also your tax collections are excellent. If you look at the bottom line there on 86 and 87, each year you're collecting over 99% of your tax levy. You're very fortunate. There's many governments that do not collect 99%. So excellent collection rate. I'm going to jump forward 2 more pages, and this will be the last page I stop on the financial statements. This is the schedule of operating expenditures per student. So I'm on page 89. And what this schedule does is takes your, just like it says, operating expenditures, and then it factors for certain payments that are non-operating, and it comes down to a bottom line operating expenditures per student of $12,311. So that's what it costs to educate each student. Your average daily attendance was, you can see just above that amount there was 6,583, so that was the average daily attendance at all the schools. And that 12,311 is very impressive. I went back and looked at the 2018 results were available from the State Board of Education, and your dollar value last year was $12,675. And if you compare yourself to all the other high school districts in the state, there were 97 high school districts, and you were the 20th from the bottom, if you will. You're the most economical. And if you look at just the collar counties, you were the lowest. So every single high school district in the collar counties, they had a higher cost per student than you did. So you're doing a great job with the money that you have educating your students. Any questions on the financial statements? I'm gonna jump to another document, and if you want to hold your questions to the end, that's fine too.
However you want. Document by document, or till the end. I'm leaving it up to you.
Yeah, let's wait till the end.
All right.
The next one, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this document. It's called the single audit. And what we do here is we're reporting on your federal grants. And so we do extra special testing on the special education program. And we did not report any findings. So you got a good, clean single audit report. There's several pages you can read through, several opinions and whatnot, but the bottom line is that we didn't have any findings on the single audit. One other document that I'm not sure if it's in your packet or not, all this information is reported to the state in what's called the annual financial report form. And so if you look at that, it's the same dollars in both documents. But one page that's in there is what's called the estimated financial profile summary. And based on the scoring system of the state, and this is on page 4 of that AFR, they have a system where they weight certain items, and your score this year is 3.15, which puts you in what's called the review category. Last year you were in what's called the warning category, and the 2 years before that you were on the watch list. So you're moving up categories, which is excellent. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to talk about some of the letters that you see in front of you, and then we'll take questions.
Good evening. You should have 3 letters that accompany the financial statements and the AFR. The first one I won't really touch on. That's the communication with those charged with governance during audit planning. That's a required communication between us as auditors and the district. And it just lays out our responsibilities as well as the planned scope of the audit. The second letter is communication with those charged with governance at the conclusion of the audit. Another required letter from us, the auditors, to you, the district. It states, again, our responsibility as auditors. It states that we had no significant difficulties in performing the audit. We had no disagreements with management. And then also attached to that letter, you'll find the adjusting journal entries. So the district provided us with a trial balance. Add in these journal entries. Those are how you get to the numbers that you see in the financial statements. The third letter is the management letter. So even though we had no deficiencies or material weaknesses, we had a few recommendations for improvements. The first was the Comprehensive Policies and Procedures Manual. This was a repeat from prior years, and I know the district is in the works to complete that during this fiscal year. The second comment was regarding capital assets and the tracking of capital assets. Again, that was a repeat from prior years. The third comment was expenditures in excess of budget. The capital projects fund was just a little over budget, a little over $16,000 during fiscal 19. And that fourth comment is just a, for your information, next year the district will be subject to a new GASB. So we're just recommending that the district familiarize itself. It will affect your financial reporting with student activity and agency funds.
So there you have it. Any, let the questions begin.
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions on the numbers. I think we've gone over those enough. But a few things that every time I look at this report, I want clarification on. And I know this is a non-cash item, but I see the adjusting entries, and then it goes on the financial statement, and we're always way off budget. These on behalf of payments from the state. And I know it's just a number coming in from the state and it's offset, but they make us budget for it, right? When do we find out that information?
Well, the information is actually based on the prior year. So next year's, or the one that's in this year is really based on the activity as of June 30th, 18 at the state level. And so that, it just depends on when they release the reports. I've seen it as early as March, and I've seen it as late as June. So I mean,
So March of 2020 will be
the next time you see
will be the one that will be in the.
Yes.
Okay. So there's no way to, when you're budgeting, you don't know that number. I mean, when your budget's due by September 30th, you don't know.
You
that
cannot know that number. You're right.
So this is common practice that you have this.
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess along those same lines, all this information, the footnotes on the pensions, et cetera, is that just, obviously that's this number here. Is that just information you're taking from the state, or are you calculating this?
Well, that's a great question, and everything that, all of those amounts that for the, you've got the net pension liability, you've got two of them.
Right.
And then you've got other post-employment benefits liabilities, and those are all coming from actuarial reports that are
And then So going to page 26. Number 4, which is talking about, you know, the first line I understand completely, where the superintendent, with the board's approval, is, you know, able to move 10% of the total budget. The second part of that, where you have any revisions that alter the total expenditures of any fund must be approved by the Board of Education. So I guess I get sometimes confused towards the end of the year when we're talking about, do we have to amend the budget? Don't we have to, you know, do we not have to, and with the 30-day window? So is it any time your expenditure, so you budget an expenditure, let's say we budget $1 million. So is this saying anytime if we went $1,010,000, would we have, does that mean we have to amend the budget?
Yeah, if you're changing the total in the.
The total in any fund,
Yes.
right? So the general fund, you can move money around between the categories, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Education versus,
Well,
but if
not,
it's
not,
in,
not from education to operation and maintenance.
right,
But
but any of
within
the
education,
educational
yes.
lines, right? So for example, this capital projects, we were over 16,000. Obviously, we could have moved money from operations and maintenance, right? If it was within.
A transfer of some sort.
Transfer, right. But otherwise, you have to amend. And to amend, you really have to know if your May and June meetings are, you really have to start thinking about that in April, because you need 30 days, right?
Right.
Then my last general question, I think I probably asked this before, but the cash basis of accounting. I know it's allowed for school districts, obviously. Do you see any movement to accrual, or how many, like, do you see most school districts sticking with the cash basis of accounting?
Yes. More than, you know, out of the 800 plus school districts in the state, more are on cash basis than are on accrual basis.
And why is that? Because it's just allowed and
It's allowed, it's easy, it makes a lot of sense for schools, especially in areas where you only have maybe a superintendent and no business manager, no, you know, they have very, very small budgets. Just the time and effort it would take to come up with accrual-based information that doesn't really help the Board of Ed make decisions. I like it for school districts, because you've got a definite starting point and ending point to a year. The only time it might affect true revenues is where you're waiting on money and the state's late in paying, and so yes, could one year look terrible and the next year looks great because of the timing of the payments? Yes, it does happen. But I mean, the simplicity of it, I just think it works very well for schools.
And there's no movement afoot for schools for that to change?
Oh, to be mandatory?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
I guess my last comment, I guess, would be, not for the others, but this change in what is it, GASB 84, I think we should have a discussion about that at the board level and how that's going to impact.
I was going to ask did you do a look ahead to see how much of an impact it would have on us at all? Or did you just pointed out that we need to be prepared for it?
Yeah, what it's gonna take is just, going and looking at each of the activity funds and seeing how are they funded? Is the board, or not the board, but does the district have, substantial control over how the money is spent? No matter what happens, the way they're gonna get recorded is going to change because they're eliminating what's called agency funds. And so it would look, we can flip to the page, it would look very similar to, there's really two ways this is gonna go. If you move back to page 19, so you got page 18 and 19, you've got the balance sheet, if you will, for the private purpose trust, which is the scholarship fund, and then you've got the balance sheet next to it for the student activity funds. That'll stay the same. One thing that would happen though is if it's determined, well, no matter what happens, you're not gonna see that due to activity fund organizations as a liability, it's gonna be part of fund balance. So that's for sure. And then if it's determined that you don't have substantial control of the agency funds that they kind of do their own thing, it would go side by side on page 19. If it's determined that there is substantial involvement and it needs to be recorded as what's called a governmental activity, it's going to need to get grouped up into basically like a sub-fund of the education fund. So that activity that runs through there, and if we look back to page, it'll take me just a second to get there. On page 85 is what's called the scheduled cash receipts, cash disbursements, and ending balances. This is your student activities. And you can see $5.2 million came in and 5.3 went out during the year. So that would be now revenues and expenditures that would have to get reported into the financial statements.
And that's from this fiscal year?
The fiscal year that we just started, yes.
So, in theory, if a large portion of that 5 million had to go onto the school, we would have to amend our budget, right?
Yeah, or you just would go over budget, right? Yes. And see that the State Board of Ed hasn't
If
really
we go over
been-
budget, then you're gonna put a little note on our.
That's exactly right.
Josh.
I don't know what the State Board of Ed is doing and how they're, because they did not modify the budget form at all. And I don't know if they're gonna modify the AFR, the annual financial report form, to account for this. So I'm not sure where they're going with it.
So you were saying, Chris, and I jumped in, sorry.
Something that the board wants.
Yeah, I kind
Kelly.
of jumped in and asked about.
Oh, I was just
Yeah,
recommending
we'll bring
that
it
we
back.
bring that topic
Yes.
back to the board.
Sorry to
We'll
cut
do
you
that.
off.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your work.
Moving on, the restructuring of the 2009 callable bonds. Our friends from PNA are here.
Mr. Lewis, you're next.
I'm the one who said it wasn't option D. Option D is not the right one to pick.
Brad, that's not the AFR.
So tonight I'm going to review some of the items we've already discussed, especially those principles that guide this decision for restructuring, why we're doing it in phases. But we really want to be mindful of the end goals, possible end goals, and how your debt picture could look like. But we really want to drill down and focus on the decision you need to make in the next couple months here, and how that decision will impact the district's debt just in this first phase. This first slide is a summary of the municipal bond market shown against the federal funds rate. We've spent a lot of time talking about this in prior meetings. Just want to focus you in now on the far right-hand side where we've had a lot of fluctuations. About 20 basis points up, 20 basis points down over the last couple of months after coming down quite a bit. So we seem to be getting in a band now of moving up, moving down, which I don't suspect we'll be moving on that anytime in the short run, but things that it's sensitive to. There's news about Brexit, for instance. Today there was an announcement of agreement. Of course, Parliament has to pass it, which what does that have to do with us here in Lincoln Way schools? Well, that caused the stock market to initially rally, so treasury yields go up a little bit, and hence the municipal bond market yields closed up a couple of basis points today. Other things to be mindful of is trade, tariffs, and other items which may give indications of whether the economy is, our economy, the world economy is entering into recession. So, for the time being, it seems to be this is where we're at, barring some sort of major event like that, causing people's perspectives on the market to swing one way or the other. So let's review the restructuring plan. The board set forth some objectives earlier this year that it would like to accomplish as part of any restructuring plan, and the objectives that guide the decisions that we make in our recommendations and the administration provides to the board. First one, and these aren't necessarily in any order of importance, is to consider all options for selling Lincoln Way North and then using those sale proceeds to apply to any debt restructuring, unless the sale needs to occur before some significant milestone. Like for instance, next year, the debt levy goes up to $7-ish million, so it's a significant milestone. Call dates are significant milestones. No refinancing to district's credit ratings, at least Baa3, which is the lowest Moody's grade investment rating. If you've got that, you achieved that just a couple months ago. This first phase would be financing of about $25 million. You'll see here in a little bit. Most of that's amortized over the next couple of years, so it's not as impactful to what the status of your long-term rating is, because you wouldn't be paying that interest for very long. It's more impactful to continue to see this rating move upward before the next phase, which would probably entail a much larger restructuring. And if you continue on the trends that you are, you suspect that your rating would be higher by then, hopefully within the A category. By the time you would have to do something of substantive size and length. Do not issue any more zero coupon, or also called capital appreciation bonds, which are typically sold without a call. Sell at interest rates 0.5, 0.75%, and in some markets as much as 1% higher. So none of the plans that we've presented include those. Any refinancing should not extend the debt structure more than 3 years. Right now, the decision you're making now isn't even come close to that, but part of making this decision is kind of looking forward what the next phase might look like. Focus on total dollar levy, not the tax rate. The dollar levy is the variable that you can control. You can't really control the tax rate. Tax rate's going to bounce around with whatever EAB does. To the extent possible, do the restructuring is tax exempt. This first phase would be tax exempt. Subsequent phases may have to be taxable if you have to call some non-callable caps. And if you were able to sell Lincoln Way North, for instance, would be able to use that cash to actually defease those bonds, and you would eliminate the need for any taxable bonds. No debt restructuring shall be done without review and analysis of how it impacts the long-term debt objectives. So that's why, as we're doing this little phase here at the beginning, we're always mindful of what it might look like at the end. So you've heard me mention phasing, and as I went through those points, why phase? When I say phasing, it means you're not doing it all at one time. Like the last time you did a restructuring, you did a major restructuring all at one time, and that, as we know now, proved to be costly to do that much of a restructuring at once. So some of the bonds that you would likely have to restructure are the 06 bonds and 13 bonds, which are either not callable or not callable for a few years. If you did something now, it would have to be taxable at a rate 0.75%, up to 1% higher. The all-in premium may fluctuate over time, may decrease, may increase. That's something else you can't control. It depends on your perspective, what direction that could move, and the decisions that are made out of Springfield. Provides more time for districts to improve its credit rating. I already covered that. Provides time to sell Lincoln Way North. Just as a rule of thumb, for every $10 million of cash applied to reduce principal eliminates about $16 million of debt service, because you're also eliminating the interest associated with the principal that you're paying off. And it's a fluid number depending upon where the bonds are amortized and what phase. So it's not. Well, again, it's a rule of thumb. So you may get a different result by doing 30 million versus 60 million, for instance. But generally speaking, about $6 million. We eliminate completely 10 million, or 16 million, sorry. And lastly, it allows you to revisit goals at each phase. So while in the prior presentations, I presented these three options, which sort of showed you what the end result could look like. The end result doesn't have to look like that, because you have the opportunity at each phase to revisit the end goal. Consider new factors that you didn't know when you did the prior phase. Now your plan only contemplates 2 phases, but there could be an interim phase, for instance, if you do this first phase, restructuring bonds, and a year from now you get proceeds from sale of school. Well, we would take those proceeds and immediately reduce debt. And then when you get to the call date on some of your outstanding bonds, that would be a third phase. So that's again where things have to be fluid. Option 1, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on tonight, from my understanding, it's not one that the board really wants to consider. That's where you let the levy go up $7 million next summer, and that I'm not going to talk about because that's not really an option that the board is interested in playing out. Option 2 and option 3. Option 2 would modify the levy from having the large increase to having $2 million annual increases. And option 3 would be annual increase of about $2.25 million. So you can see if the first couple of years, one's going up $2 million the first couple of years, and the other scenario is going up $2.25 million in the first couple of years, that's really a variation of the first decision here. Because you're only affecting levy year 19 and levy year 20, and so it's $250,000 in one year, which compounds $500,000 in the second year. So, and then even if you choose option 2, and then 2 years from now, board changes its mind, wants to do something that looks like more of the path of option 3, you haven't really made that critical decision that you can't change gears. Okay, so we really want to have the board, understand that tonight, which you'll see graphically here in just a moment. It looks like I already covered some of the items on this slide. This is the first bullet point. So what is the difference then in the impact of the taxpayer in our options 2 and option 3? For a $300,000 home, the reduction in the bill from what it would otherwise. So I just want to make it clear, this doesn't mean the bond interest portion of the bill is going down from last year. It means it's going down from where it would be if you did nothing. So that from the status quo, the bill would be $101 lower in levy year 19 and $81 in levy year 20 for option 2. And it's $95 and $69 respectively in option 3. So it's not a major difference in the impact of the taxpayer on those 2 choices. It's more about, this time, making this decision now, it sort of gives a general idea to the administration and the board of what you would like to see the end goal look like, but not necessarily be stuck to that path. Okay, so if you choose option 2, again, doesn't mean later on you can't choose option 3 or option question mark that doesn't even exist right now. For instance, we haven't even modeled anything here that exactly shows what the application of cash should look like. So it's more likely if you're able to sell the school, we're looking at an option that hasn't even ran yet. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. And then lastly, for the restructuring component, for options 2 and 3, it's about $10 million-ish of the 2009 bonds, so that's the only issue impacted in this first phase, is restructured and pushed out. The balance of the 2009 bonds is about $15 million. You can refinance that portion and put it right back in the same years at a reduced interest rate with some savings for that $15 million component. So I've added a new slide that I had before. It shows you the potential savings on that $15 million portion that doesn't need to be restructured. So I'm contrasting these 2 terms. Restructured generally means you're taking it and moving it out. Refunded means you're trying to save money by, much like you would refinance your home and you kept the term the same. We estimate that savings at about $168,000. So graphically here, you can see the impact of phase 1 under both options 2 and 3. The gray area represents the current trajectory of the district's outstanding debt service payments. Levy year 18 is what you just collected this year for payments that you're making now in this fiscal year. Levy year 19 would be the payments that are for next summer, and your deadline to change those payments is March 1st of 2020. So if you look at the blue bars and the green bars, you can see the slight difference in levy years 19 and 20, with option 2 being slightly lower. It's because we're minimizing the increases to $2 million a year versus $2.25 million per year. And the years after that, the difference is so incremental that you really can't see it by the naked eye. And then the addition to debt service is these 2 bars right here. That's the portion that's restructured and moved out in this first phase. Again, falling within not extending debt more than 3 years. This is the estimated savings for the portion of the 09 bonds not restructured. So that's, again, roughly $15 million. Your savings are about $168,000 on a present value basis. It's not a significant amount of savings, but you're only refunding 2 years worth of principal payments. There's not much you can save when there's only that much left of those bonds. But while you're doing the restructuring, you might as well do this at the same time if you can save any money at all. It's less, it's $170,000 or so of debt service, less debt service than you have to pay.
In the option 1 and 2, this is included when you're calculating
Yes.
the present value and everything.
Yeah. So the last slide in the body of the presentation, and then there's detailed stuff in the appendix I do not plan to cover. It's the detailed pro formas that feed into those graphs we just looked at, and then you have the full restructuring plans, phases 1 and 2, so it's there for your reference. I think it's always good to have that there so the board's always mindful of what the end game could look like. So what's the potential timeline then? The board would need to adopt what's called a parameters resolution no later than December. So that parameters resolution would set forth a not to exceed issuance amount. It would set forth the bond issue you're contemplating to refund, maximum interest rate that would guide your financing team and administration to implement the plan that you want to do. Now, those parameters aren't so tight that if we need to adjust to something that occurs in the market that we can't get it done because we don't have to come back to the board. Ultimately, then when the sale is completed, the delegates are responsible to report back to the board the final results. The delegates we typically name in there to authorize the sale, separate from the board meeting, would be the board president and the superintendent or assistant superintendent of finance. So one elected, one administrative official will sign off on the transaction. We would anticipate going to Moody's in January to deliver the credit presentation. Bonds will be sold in either late January or early February, and then once the sale occurs, you can file documentation with the county to change your levies. You don't have to wait for the bonds to close. The bonds won't actually close until approximately March 1st. This is really the latest that you could go. You could go, if you want to pass the resolution in November, you certainly can.
So I was going to ask that. So if we pass this in November, does that move Moody's to December, and then does it make sense to sell bonds in early January, or would you still wait? Or?
No, you could definitely do Moody's in December, and because now we have your audit, which they already sort of knew the audit results. So, but it's nice to get the actual audit when we go to them. And then selling in early January, well, it's not always the case. Sometimes can be advantageous because that very first week of January, that's a partial week. You don't want to sell that week because people are still coming back from the holidays. But the week after that, the first full week, supply is generally low, so you might have more buyers available for your bond issue. So targeting that could be advantageous. Hasn't always worked out very well. Because obviously there's other things that impact the municipal bond market. The next Fed meeting's in December, so I don't think there's one in January.
It's next week.
I'm sorry, I meant the one after. I'm sort of moved beyond that one. Because I've been scheduling a lot of sales in November, and like as we're scheduling my kids, no Fed meeting in November we have to worry about.
So we're really
So-
looking at two options here, correct? Option 2 and 3? And the
I think
difference is
that-
between $500,000 roughly?
Right. And remember,
Which one would you choose then?
I would choose, well, let me just remind you really briefly the difference of what those look like optically, you know, on option 2, I want to just flip to those slides here. Looks like that, you know, it has the objective to eventually get the level of debt service. I'm sorry, that's one, sorry. That's option 2. And we get the level of debt service, we're taking advantage of the full 3 years that the board has authorized, versus option 3, it's actually more on a steep trajectory that doesn't necessarily actually flatten out. And again, you can, if you choose option 2 and you want to do option 3 next time, you're fine doing that.
So I was gonna suggest 2A, which is basically going ahead with this first part. I think it's the right thing to do here.
What do you mean by the first part?
Well, the option 2 with the 2 million annual increases. But I wouldn't like say right away, and this is just, again, I think phasing is absolutely the right way to do. I think you learned anything from what we've done in the past. But I would say keep it to where we're still only extending it to, or we're only gonna say 1.5 years. I know that's probably looks more like that then, but I'm just option 2 without fully buying into the 3-year.
So you mean actually mean option 3, right? Because
Yeah, I mean,
unfortunately,
option 3 with the $2 million increases instead of 2.25. Is that
oh, I see
something that looks like that?
He's splitting the difference between the two options?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Here's the question I just want everybody to rattling around my brain. I mentioned this to Scott at one point, that one of the reasons I struggle with extending this at all is the fact that at some point we will need to create bonds. The district will need debt again for capital improvements or whatever it may be. And the longer we kick it out again, the greater the risk of that capital need could happen, and we'd still be servicing bonds that took place 20 plus years ago. So I don't think this phase right here isn't the killer phase. I get it, but we need to start thinking. We need to start looking up a little bit further. So I would challenge administration to take that 10-year capital improvement plan and to the best of your ability, extend it to whatever we make the longest maturity of these bonds. So if we have 10 years where we're replacing a roof, we need to know what it's going to look like in 2034. So that we don't unintentionally sit down and say, you come back in 2031 and say, oh my gosh, we're going to have $40 million worth of capital improvements. Making up that number, Joe. I just totally understand. Okay, and then we're sitting here saying, oh wait, but we're still servicing X $100 million worth of debt, and all this wonderful praise you got from Warmer Rogers and Moody's and whomever else starts to find its way back into muck because we either A, haven't saved for it, or B, we don't have the ability to leverage. Now, it could solve itself through EAV, it could solve itself through a lot of different magical things that could happen, which is exactly what people thought the last time they redid these bonds.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, but they did it by tax rate, which is not what we're doing.
I understand, but I'm just saying that there were other components that they thought through the natural course of things would help be a satisfier and a cure of whatever ill was being kicked out later. And as you saw, I mean, it was totally unpredicted, but our auditor said, hey, you were $4 billion, you took this 10-year dive, and you're still not back to $4 billion yet. So you can't rely on unpredictable natures of EAV in the market to solve that problem. What we have to do is do the math and say, hey, we know what it looks like for 10 years, right, Brett? You kicked it out, and here's our 10-year capital improvement model. Well, we're gonna have to take our best guess, knowing the further we get away, the less solid the numbers are to the final maturity of these bonds. Because at some point you may have to put an addition onto a school, or do a major revamp, or who knows what education may look like in 2034. And if we find ourselves limited, then whomever's sitting in his chairs, I'm sure Aaron will still be here, that we will they'll be able to look back and say, you guys didn't lay it all out, all the way out. The other question I have is, what is the cost to do all this? The actual expense, is there expense?
Cost of issuance?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have those yet obtained, but it's
Estimate.
usually about 1.5% of the bond amount for the size you're considering.
And so everything we're talking about net, when we're talking savings, these are net savings,
Yes.
anticipating 1.5.
Right.
No, I agree, and that's why I don't wanna pick an option that says we're going out 3 years. I mean, I think that this was 2015, they extended it another 5 years already, so I'm fully in agreement, but we do have a big step up here, and I think it's relatively inexpensive given where rates are, and to add 1 year on with a small amount relative to what it would have been in 2031, it comes, you know, what is that, $8 million, I think. That's why I tried to get it, when I was asking for things, to get it in these phases, because I think really all we're voting on now is this first phase. And, you know, these are how it could look, but like you said, there's numerous things that could come up before the next callable date on the bonds.
So, I guess, you know, Brad, Scott, I don't know who was this.
Yeah, we can look at that and see, and you bring up a really good point. It's also the unknown of, it's still the unknown of funding in the state of Illinois. For years, you're always gonna get it, you're always gonna get it. Right now, we're able to budget for $4 million in those capital expenditures. There may come a time where we can't, and that's where we would be in this need of additional bonding. Bonding potential to be able to complete rough projects and parking lots, and you know, we put in brand new turf. We don't know what the cost of turf will be now in 12 to 15 years when we will have to put it in, you know, redo that turf. So I think you bring up a good point. So we can go out 12 to 15 years and kind of match what we're looking at here with the known expenses of parking lots and roofs.
That's all I ask.
Absolutely.
Again, we don't know what we don't know, so we can't predict that, but we also have to consider that that could be a possibility. And you know, the other question, Robert, that I have is, does any of this restructuring, could it potentially have any impact on the Moody's ratings or any of the credit ratings?
No, not in a negative way, because we've disclosed to them what the restructuring plans are as part of the last analysis. And I think, you know, they've always cited the debt load as a credit factor that weighs on the rating. I think once we've completed 2 phases and then it's done and you start to retire some debt, and so you're not kicking a can down the road, that can be a credit positive.
I'm just more worried about, because of the phase, big fan of phasing, that if we do something in phase 1 and we're talking about lifting of the rating that would impact the cost of doing phase 2, that if we did something in phase 1 that would limit the ascent of the credit rating by the time we get to phase 2, that's why I'm asking the question now.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you think you're gonna get to an A, but you end up at a B+ because you did what you did in phase 1.
Yeah, there's nothing cumulative about what you do in phase 1. In fact, you know, the guidelines that you set for, we explain the reasons for the phasing, the potential for selling an asset and applying that cash to debt. Those are all things that they think are good positive factors. Once that's implemented, and if you're able to sell the high school and apply that to the debt, I mean, that's just gonna bring the score up more, but there's nothing that you're doing now that's gonna negatively impact it. I think if you were to do something like it was done a few years ago, where you scraped off and pushed out a ton again, that would be a negative credit factor, that would weigh down the rate.
And I know this is more of a phase 2 question, but I'm gonna plant the seed now. Do we truly have quantified the amount of debt that if it was restructured would be subject to becoming a taxable event? Do we actually have the dollar amount associated with that? Is it just the 13B and the whatever it was, 09?
Yeah, it would be, if you go back to, in the appendix, this slide, it's those years in the green, where the only bonds that you really have that can be structured are these 4 payments that are non-callable caps. And the size of that issue, I think I can give you an estimate. Depends on how he titled that portion of the restructuring. Just a moment. So, yeah, it's not that large. If you look at slide 29, that pink column here, that's the taxable restructuring component. And it looks like that final payment, so the first 4 years are pretty much just interest for that 5-year restructuring piece. And then it's 9.6 million, so it looks like it's under $10 million.
That would be subject to, could be taxable.
Right.
If we, okay.
And it's cut, and whenever we do a restructuring involves a taxable component, we amortize that first to get rid of it.
Right.
So it's not that big of a penalty, but if we can avoid it with cash being applied to the refunding, all the better.
Again, I think with phasing in, I mean, you can think about a few things there that are potential, the land, even if you don't sell the building, but you have the land. You also have, if we do get our reserves up, you can defease some of that.
Right.
So I think that's, because issuing is taxable, I don't know, what's the differential in the interest rate?
On a short, that would be a relatively short one, so it might be at most 0.75%.
75 to 100 basis points. But just planning the idea that that 9 million, if we could find a way to cash that out, then it releases some of the shackles around what the cost would be in phase 2. That's why I wanted to throw it out there now so people can start thinking in that mindset. It's a lot of brownies and candy bars.
So am I hearing the recommendation would bring back the parameters resolution in November for consideration by the board, and then we can work through this and have everything ready? Yes. Okay.
When does that mean?
21st, November 21st.
November 21st, okay.
Would that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
And from there, we can put together a timeline of events. We'll have to, because your credit ratings would not be a candidate for a competitive sale, we do negotiate sales, so we would work with the administration to do a request for proposals for underwriter and review those. And, not sure if we'd had that done by the 21st, but definitely we'd have that done by December, so we can report back to the board the results of that proposal.
Good work.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the special meeting minutes from the September 19th, 2019, approval of the regular meeting minutes from September 19th, 2019, approval of the special closed meeting minutes of September 19th, 2019, approval of the regular closed session meetings of September 19th, 2019, approval of the payrolls from September 20th and October 4th, 2019. Would anyone like anything pulled from the consent items for discussion? All right. With that, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. So we'll have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Without any further discussion, if you'd open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous, the motion passes.
All right, we're going to go out of order here for a moment, if you would. We'd like to move on to the action items. We're going to move number 9 up to number 1 to let you gentlemen that have been sitting there so patiently for so long get out with things.
So we're going to go right from audit to bond to insurance.
Yeah.
It's a triathlon.
We really need coffee for the meetings. All right, gentlemen.
I saw you getting ready to leave, I'm like, we better.
Wanted to know where the nuns are.
I get it.
Well, we have with us tonight from Stum Insurance, Steve Hogan, Brian Stum, and Dave Stum, to make a brief presentation, answer any questions the board may have. The proposed contract is in the backup materials and the administration's recommendation to move forward. But they put together a brief presentation, answer any questions that the board may have.
We thought we'd introduce ourselves and what our role is in this, and you have the presentation there. We won't bore you by going through it, but I'm Steve Hogan, I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Stum Insurance. My role in this on an ongoing basis will act as a relationship manager. Dave will talk a little bit about his consulting team that really will manage the account, but my role would be to act as a liaison between you folks and your team here on the administration team and the board and our team at Stum Insurance.
I'm Brian Stum. I lead our sales and development team. I've been working on and off with the district for a couple of years. I'm very familiar with the team here, and obviously my role will be to help transition your group from the outside to the inside, and then to my brother Dave and the team that will manage it on a daily basis.
And I'm Dave Stubb. I am one of the owners of Stum Insurance along with my other three brothers. I'll be the lead consultant if we are fortunate enough to go forward with you guys, overseeing a team of really four people that would directly service your whole program. And we handle everything from the financials, working with the board, of course, communication with employees, working with the schools, handling problems, pretty much everything that touches the benefits program, my team would get involved in. I don't know if you had a chance to go through the materials. We can certainly take you through the slides if you want us to, or we can just open up for questions, however you guys like to do it.
Does anyone have any questions in particular, any concerns with the contract? The contract was reviewed by the board attorneys at John Izzo's office, made some recommended changes that Stum was gracious enough to accept. And so at this time, if there are any additional questions, we could address those.
Well, I guess on the contract, I would ask, so obviously, I guess backing up, there's two parts to it. One, we're retaining you as a broker, and then second, as a consultant. Is that the typical arrangement? Or is there normally like a consulting piece and you have someone else as the broker, or is this basically how you do it?
So those terms in our industry, consulting generally means that we're paid directly by our clients and not through the sale of any products. So the term broker means a couple of things. Typically it means that we would research the market and find the best opportunities for you. You'll also find in the contract, Chris, that any fee, any commissions from the sale of any products would be removed from the product. So those terms are interchangeable in what we deliver in terms of service, but it really defines how we get paid. So, and what actions we take on your behalf. For example, to evaluate whether company A is a better dental provider than company B, C, or D. So that is a brokerage function that we're going to the market on your behalf. We're not going to be compensated that way.
What are the exclusions for them? Because there is an exclusion clause in the credit for commissions, which allows you to still be paid for incentive or bonus compensation paid by insurance carriers.
We can speak to that. If you want to
Sure, yeah. Insurance carriers pay us either commissions or our clients pay us consulting fees. But with all the carriers that we work with, industry standard is that the carriers provide or pay some sort of override compensation based on the amount of business that's placed with them or the amount of business that's retained with them. Candidly, the programs are all very much the same. We are not influenced. Specifically, it addresses that. That was one of the edits that your attorney made for the contract, is that we would never be steering business or suggesting that you go to a carrier A versus carrier B because of those overrides. As a total revenue to Stum Insurance, carrier overrides is less than 3%. It's really not something very big that we pay attention to, but it does exist in our industry.
Assuming we're keeping something similar to what we have in place now, I mean, what are the commission offsets to the dollar amounts listed in the contract, roughly?
So our intent would be to establish programs with carriers and put products in place that have no commissions. I don't want to offset that. So to the extent that we can control that, there will be no commissions in anything. For most of our clients, we're able to achieve that, so I can't even imagine a scenario where that would be a problem, but, you know, we want to put that in there so it's fully transparent. It's really the whole idea of this entire discussion and us getting involved even years ago with the district is to try to bring more transparency around not only the program itself, but certainly the compensation that's included in it.
And there are
The broker, the consultant that manages the association's co-op today, you know, has commissions in there, has overrides that their agency is paid. It's really no different. We just, you know, today we don't know a lot what that looks like, and so going forward we will.
So, and maybe this is kind of for administration too, but we're transitioning the program and you have to have certain reserves, right? And money is now with the
trust.
Yeah, Shorewood or the trust. So we were sending a letter in and we were gonna get information back by October 1st. Did we get back that information?
Yes, so we got an affirmative letter back from them stating that they are more than willing to work with us. Of course, they feel like staying in the co-op would be our best interest, but they felt like all of those bullet points were per the trust agreement, and we did not see any red flags or concerns.
Yeah, they read all terms and conditions.
Who was the they is the incurred church provider?
Yeah, the
co-op.
Yes, the chair of the co-op. We have another meeting Monday where they will discuss all of terms and conditions will be met, it will be voted on, and then we'll have an official letter. But they've already run it through their legal, and compared it to the contracts, and said, yes, what they're asking for is reasonable. But it'll be formally approved Monday.
So the transition planning on this, so we have the money with RDA. Are we gonna know like the timing of when we will get access to that capital? And I know before you said we couldn't switch previously when we looked at this because of
And that's something that Stone will help us with Blue Cross Blue Shield to determine what those amounts and when those dates will be. So what will be the payout, so to speak?
Typically, there's two, when we talk about reserves, there are really two buckets typically in good, sound financial accounting. And one is called an IBNR. It's an incurred but not reported number. Those are people that went to the doctor on today, but the claim doesn't get submitted for a period of time. The event took place, but you're not funding it. Typically, that's around, with Blue Cross, it's 60 days or less. So to know what money would be left in the co-op would be a calculation of that incurred but not reported amount. We know the incurred but not reported amount for the whole trust today is about $1.6 million, I think. So you'll be a fraction of that, or about half of that. So that's one aspect of reserves. To be prudent, being self-insured, we'll fund our claims unless there's large events. That corridor is about another 25% of the claim. So if you really want to be prudent, you'll hold that money in reserve for a rainy day, so that you're not in the differential between what we expect the claims to be and what you're insured for. So, but to get out of the co-op, that incurred but not reported claim is about 60 days or less of your claims liability. And that's a number we will report to you. We don't have access to that today.
It will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.5, 1.6 million. Our monthly payment's about 800,000 monthly payment. So if you just assume 2 months payments, it would be about 1.6.
And there are fixed costs in there too. Those aren't just claims you're funding at 800,000, but nonetheless, that's about what it is, Chris.
So when we're transitioning, I think we need to see sort of the number, because we're also budgeting in for this year and next year, insurance payment holiday, so I know we're way, I know you said we need 4 million and we're up at 8 right now, but these things start to add up and we're very tight this budget year, in meeting that, so I think, we need to start looking at that from a transition standpoint.
So on around February 1st, we will have a viable cost projection of what your plan would be when you stand on your own in the month of February. That's 6 months ahead of an effective date is the earliest they'll underwrite that. So in February, we'll be able to tell you that starting July 1st, your exposure is what it is. And then we'll be able to know not only where you need to set your reserves going forward, but what you'll leave in the trust to fund your claims that run out. Because those will be the responsibility of the trust to pay. And they'll hold back your monies until those IBNR claims are paid.
Yeah, but I just want to understand, like, I know this isn't for you, but from us getting out of the co-op, when we're gonna have that money, because we want to pay down, we want to get those TAWs down at the end to zero.
Yeah, and Brad
So
and I have
I just want to
discussed,
see.
We'll get the timing too. We have it, kind of, Brad's already working it into his cash flow for that following year. Once we get the number that we definitely have to leave from STUM, that will tell us what our carryover will be and when we would have that additional $3 or $4 million. So we will have that ready for you and looking into our cash flows. Because that will have a significant impact on our timing of borrowing that next year. Yeah, we'll have that for you.
But also, I think it's getting from the co-op when they would pay out.
When they'll release.
Like, I don't know if they get an audit or sometimes they hold back until they get the audit. Does that mean that we're not gonna see that money until this time? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
No, it's our money within that cooperative. We will be required to pay, to have the IBNR. Did I say that right? Okay, but the majority of that money we will be able to take, so we've already discussed that with the cooperative, and that will be all done in writing, and we'll get that timing back to you.
Anybody have anything further? Thank you,
Just,
Jim.
sorry, 2 more questions. Why is the contract starting October 22nd, effective date, and we're not paying fees until January 1st, or the term starts January 1st?
Well, we wanted to get to work right away, number one, so that, developing a proposal for February 1st is not a light switch. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to gather data, to have the underwriting take place, to be effective. And so we really wanted to get busy right away, and we saw that there was really no reason for that until we're actually dealing with the marketplace. So I think we're going to be here next week if this gets passed to build a timeline for delivery for, a proposal that you can understand in February. So we want to get working right away and get access to your information. That's basically why.
Are these contracts typically 3 years?
So it's not a 3-year contract, it's actually a 42-month price guarantee, is what it is. Once we are through the first 18 months of the contract, you're free to go. All that is saying is that the price does not change for 42 months. And I would tell you that that's fairly atypical, so we thought that was a differentiator and something you'd appreciate.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think, I know you guys have done a lot of work and helped out a lot in advance, but I think we also have to, make sure that we're paying the proper market rate, and I think after a year, you have to look at that. So I think, structuring it the way it is fine. I just didn't know how typical it is to have, if it was typically. So
That's great.
after that, So after this contract is up, would it just be annual?
I think the way that
Contract or-
the contract is actually worded as a quarter to quarter. Okay,
So I understand here, it ends in 2023.
We can,
Moving
it
forward,
would be up for
we
discussion.
can go to
Yeah,
we could do RFP of whatever terms.
The contract expires in 2023, but your first termination is June of
Right.
21.
That's what you're right.
That's right. We did that on purpose. This is atypical. Today, you know, you have a plan that renews in July, you roll it out to employees in January, and you're making financial decisions in a budget year that is not congruent with either of those. And so, you know, it's pretty atypical that we're gonna do a market analysis so on July 1st, the folks here have what they have today, because they're still in the middle of a plan year. And then there's a second marketing phase that's gonna take place to get your dates on the same schedule as the benefit plan year. So it's a little atypical in that sense. That's really why we felt like we wanted to have that 18 months to get you through that and then test the waters. We know what the market is. I think there's a page in there about how we research that. We're below market on that. That's what we would do. It's what we did recently in another school district. We study what the public information is. We discount it 10% or so, and that's what we lead with. And we don't win or lose because of that. So I think that's what you'll find. But I wanted you to know, Chris, that the benchmark for what the contract is very, very solid. We disclose 355 fee arrangements for similarly sized employers as Lincoln Way is. So it's a good number.
And so, I mean, one of the benefits of this, right, is we obtain the information on how we're using health services, et cetera. You're gonna analyze that for us, right?
Yeah.
Is that information that we're able, I mean, as a public entity, and we can provide that to them, or is it, you know, it's just kept at the district level? You know, like, it isn't, and we're not providing you with employee information, right?
Individual.
Like, how do you get the information?
Well, yes, we will have access to claims for your employees, and we will analyze that. Any reports to you, either at this level or even at a committee level, will be identified, protected health information. We'll have a business associates agreement with you that it's very, very important to us. It's a standard part of our confidentiality. So, yeah, we'll know where your claims are. We know that today, or you know that today, some anecdotal information about that today. So yeah, it'll be HIPAA protected. We'll have all the appropriate agreements for that.
Brad, this is a new contract that we weren't talking about when we did the budget for this current fiscal year. We're okay with any budget impact?
Yeah.
I know it's not, I mean, it's less than $70,000 in this fiscal year, but.
Right, so it's the expenditure would have been expended through the trust, or now we'll be expending through, so it's just a line item. On the trust, it showed up as benefits, here it will show up as consulting services.
Assuming we can unwind the trust in a timely manner.
But you're actually paying both this year.
Well, no, we won't pay any more after July 1st, so we'll have
you have two
yes,
payments.
we'll have two payments,
Yeah, the
right,
tr-
that's
trust
what I
is
put.
still-
Because that's what I was asking.
It's all built in.
Right,
So it'll be on consulting services.
right, so that's what I put on the
We're
fiscal
okay
impact.
budget-wise.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna ask it, just because this is, I don't want it to come back in June. This will not impact the insurance holiday that was put in the budget.
No.
No.
Thank you.
You have almost over $7 million.
I know it's there.
Yeah, okay.
Just wanted to hear it said out loud.
Hold on, yeah. Okay. Brad, what month are we going to do that?
December.
December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything further? With that, I entertain a motion motion to approve the contract with Scum Insurance LLC as presented?
So moved.
Have a motion, I have a second. Have a motion and a second. You can open the vote, please.
Vote is open.
Keep them on the edge of their seat.
Teacher, could you help me?
Here we go.
Yeah,
I remember my first meeting, don't you?
The motion states that 6 members say aye, 1 member, Mr. Kirking, abstains. The motion passes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Bye-bye. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Congrats. See ya.
All right, see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
All right, moving back to the beginning of our action item, presentation of invoices for September 20th, 2019 through October 17th, 2019.
Motion to approve the invoices in the amount of $2,112,824.30.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second, do I have any discussion? You open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is 6 ayes and 1 abstain from Mrs. Stokes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to the treasurer's reports.
Yes, in your packets, the September's Treasurer's Report. We're off to a great start. The revenue is trending slightly behind, but expenditures are even more. We had a very strong tax collection for September. Won't affect us overall though, because we're just finishing out the final 18, just how we got it sooner than we thought. What I would say is, I think the biggest thing that I would like to highlight is the fact that year-to-date, our cash position, we're 5.7 million in a better position than in the prior years. So with that, I'd answer any questions.
If there are none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the financial report, the treasurer's report as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
Open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Student activities.
In the student activity, you can see that the class of 2023 at West was in the negative $8,400. Those are freshmen that purchased the candy bars. They're currently selling them. I already did my part, so I know it's already being replenished, so that will be replenished during the next month. And then a new account request is the Asian Student Union Club at Lincoln Way East. And then for informational items, we changed the description of the Rose Bowl fundraising account to the Macy's Parade fundraising in order to track the collection of fees, fundraising proceeds for the 2020 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I'd ask that you approve the student activity report as presented.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the student activities reports? I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion?
Just real quick, back that GASB 84, have we started looking into the accounting for the student activity?
Yes, Kelly, that's something that, I mean, that's one of Ryan's expertise. So we've already been working on that, and we'll bring it back to the board, likely December or January, on how that may impact reporting. Biggest thing is the determination if it goes over the general ledger, which the point was made. You put those expenses on the general ledger, we just blow past the budget that we approved last month. So we'll continue to work with Dave Meyer and make sure that we're in alignment there. The question will be, you know, if it's purchasing supplies, that's probably something that will have to go on the general ledger. But Kelly and Brad will stay on top of that. We'll bring something back to the board either December or January.
Nothing else, you'd open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Employment, Mr. Schiffbauer, how are you?
Very well. Under employment, we have Quadjo Bafor, bus driver, Cislaw Baleski, bus driver, Shannon Corridge, paraprofessional, Joe Foxell, maintenance, Dawn Izzo, bus driver, Mel Mormon, maintenance, Sharon Tolliver, bus driver, and Rebecca Willis, food service. I support to approve the employment report as presented.
I have a motion to approve the employment report.
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? You open the vote, please.
The vote is open.
Moving on, resignations.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
I'm sorry. Now moving on, resignations.
Under resignations, we have Alexandria Stull, paraprofessional, and Annette Allen, bus driver. Also, under leaves, we have Elizabeth Highland asking to extend her FMLA leave. As board to approve the leaves and resignations as presented.
I get a motion to approve the resignations and leaves as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If you'd open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Retirements.
Under retirements, we have Rachel Beatty, science teacher at Lincoln Way West, is asking to retire June 30th of 2024. We have Sandra Cooper, bus driver, is retiring effective 10/10/2019. Kimberly Horwath, bus driver, requesting to retire December 31st, 2019. And Dr. Stephen Provost, principal, Lincoln Way Central High School, asking to retire June 30th of 2024. As the board to approve these retirements as presented.
I know about that last one. Yeah, I know.
The last one's gonna get approved.
You go 3 for 4 on that last one?
Bifurcate this list, we're gonna have to vote separately.
Can I get a motion to approve the retirement report as presented?
Reluctantly, so moved.
There's not a second, it just sits
Yeah,
there.
right. What about the voting?
Second. All right, I have a motion to second. Do we want to beat this poor guy up anymore? Or no?
I think you ought to come up and
Tell us why
sing the
Norman's
school
playing.
fights on or do something.
You'd open the vote, please.
The vote is open.
Refuse to vote.
Yeah, abstain, everyone's
Abstaining.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Board goals.
Board goals, this is something that we hadn't revisited here for a couple of months. These are built directly off of our 5-year strategic plan that, believe it or not, we'll be reviewing here in just 60 days. So time flies when you're having fun. This will be the 3rd year of the 5-year plan. We will be bringing forward those items off the parking lot now because a number of the items we've accomplished. So we'll be bringing some more initiatives back to the meetings in December, but this is a carryover from those targets that were set by that strategic planning committee. I'd be happy to discuss any of those, but we will have these report outs. In fact, Amy's report out this evening was one of those goals and objectives, just to illustrate the board our entire plan for the social emotional learning throughout the year. So if there's nothing further, I would ask for approval of these targets for this year, and then we will see where we go with the strategic planning in December to create additional goals for the following year.
Entertain a motion to approve the board goals as presented. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? With that, I'd open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on, musical instruments.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yes, so as part of the long-term capital renewal, we have set aside $120,000 in the district budget, and the music people came together and brought the first replacement for equipment. We went out to bid for that. You'll see all but 2 items were bid on. Those 2 items we'll just purchase later. But I'd ask the board to approve the bid to 3 different vendors in the amount of $60,476. And the bid recap, the yellow highlight is the low bidders that would be, we purchased the item from those, that vendor.
I just noticed that it seemed, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
They all kind of bid on different things. Was there competition from other bidders for those particular items, or?
Well, I think you find it, well.
And obviously I don't know who sells what, but.
Right, exactly. I think who sells what, who has that, so, but we sent it out to, I can't remember the number of people that actually requested. I think it was 4 or 5. And we got bids back from 3.
Who selected the firms that this went out?
Well, we advertised, and so then they contact us.
So you said the budget was $120,000. Is there going to be another phase during this calendar year?
Yes.
Or this fiscal year, rather?
Right. So this was the major equipment for the musical at this time. Then they'll be working through it and come back with additional purchases.
And that'll be for the fiscal year?
For this fiscal year.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, maybe I don't know enough about musical instruments, but it would seem, were they all bidding on the same, I mean, if we put out for a viola, are they all bidding on the same quality and viola?
Right, so that's the difficult part. So the way it works is we spec out a violin. I'm not a violinist, but so a certain violin, and then we ask for or equivalent. So if they can't provide XYZ violin, they have to provide us the documentation of the violin of equal value. So they could do that, and they would just have to send us in the literature and substantiate that.
These guys sent samples? I mean, I assume they sent samples to the music department. They've probably seen what instruments they're getting?
Right, and they're familiar with these vendors, and they put together, the music department put together all the specifications.
Okay.
So then we just packaged up in the legal stuff you need for a bid, but yeah.
So they're on board?
Yes, absolutely.
That was why I asked, because it just seemed like the orchestra string instruments where there was no bid. And so, other than Favich, who does that.
They're huge. I've been paying my equivalent in favor since my kids were 3 years old for different instruments that they rent.
They were gonna put my name and put
A lot of old violins in my house. I don't know if they ever got return equivalent in favor, so. With that, if there's any further discussion, I'd entertain a motion to approve the musical instrument bids as presented.
So moved.
Any motion, I have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passed.
Moving on to the tax levy, the light stuff.
Well, with the tax levy, Brad would be happy to go through the presentation again. But last month, we presented the particulars of the tax levy. We would just at this time recommend that we approve all of the documentation as presented. The following timelines: September 9th, we did the estimate, the tax levy determination. October 17th, we would adopt. And then tomorrow, October 18th, the levy would be filed with the county clerk. If there are any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But at this time, rather than go through what was covered last time, we would just recommend that the board accept the tax levy as presented.
The motion to approve the 2019 tax levy as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion, I have a second. Second. Any questions or further discussion? Okay, if you would open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Okay. Appointment of new members to the District 210 Advisory Committee.
We have Krista Jerka, parent representing Lincoln Way West, Abby Collins, a student representing Lincoln Way West, and Hasna Husseini, a student representing Lincoln Way East, who would ask that you approve those members as presented.
And motion to approve them as presented.
So moved.
A motion, I have a second.
Second.
Motion is a second. Any further discussion? Okay, go to the vote,
The
please.
vote is open. The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
All right. 5-year financial forecast.
I like this. This could be a long presentation there, nice place to sit here. Just kidding. But it does give me a little more room to spread out here, so.
We get you something to drink.
Comfy chair.
Yes, well, thank you. So we're here to review the financial, 5-year financial projections, which have just been updated. I will just kind of run through a little bit here of what the process is. So, you know, the 5-year, or what we call the 5cast, is a comprehensive interactive planning tool. It's based off of the district budget, tax levy, then we can run scenarios, trend analysis, and we update it frequently because what it is not is a static. You know, it's not static or constantly changing. In fact, it'll, you know, by tomorrow morning, this one might be outdated. Who knows what state they're doing downstate. So, as I mentioned, the data elements, it's based off the original budget. We also have 5 years of history, so we can look in there. Tax levies, the equalization, as we talked about, the new construction benefit, and salary benefit information, and it does cover all funds. I will say right up that we will only be looking at the operating funds. So all the reports generated, because the debt service and capital projects are really restricted funds, so we won't be looking at those. It has 2 major calculators in there. The first one calculates out the tax levy, which is pretty straightforward, but it's function or governed by PTEL, the Property Tax Extension Limit Law, and it represents about 72% of our revenue. And then finally, there's another major calculator in there that we use, which calculates out salaries and benefits, and look at our salaries, cost of change of any FTEs, the health insurance, or, you know, the benefits, and the pensions. So with the base model, we'll look at 2 models tonight. The base model and what I've titled worst case in my opinion. So as I mentioned, we have 2 major property taxes that we levy. We levy operating and then the non-capped, which is debt service. We're going to look in here at what is functioning for the operating, because that is controlled by the PTEL, which is our expendable funds. The first major part in the property tax extension limit law is what is your consumer price index. Your levy for operations can only increase by the consumer price index or 5%, whichever is higher, or whichever is lower. So here's what we have built in here. So the green bars are historical, and for this is, I want to point this out, this is confusing, but this is on levy years. These reports pop right out of the system. So when it says here, so levy year 2019, which you just passed, had a CPI of 1.9, which is based on December of 18 CPI. So if you think about this, the levy year 19 based on 2018 CPI. We're projecting 2% moving forward. I will just note that the Wall Street Journal is projecting higher than that. With that said, the second part of the tax levy is the new growth. New growth is equalized assessed value that comes onto the district's books as is taxed at our marginal rate. For 2019, this, that's blue, I'm sorry, it's blue because it isn't firm yet, but the early estimates from Will County is $59.5 million, which will generate about an additional $1 million in tax revenue from the district from new taxpayers. We're anticipating $50 million going forward, which would generate about $850,000 in new revenue to the district from new taxpayers. Other revenue, we looked at evidence-based funding going up 3%. We removed the DCEO grant that we got for the surveillance cameras, and then we reinvestment income, and mods that down a little bit with the Fed changing and et cetera. We also removed E-rate funding. We're going to be sticking more with, I think it's called the BEAR method. We're going to be asking vendors to take the reimbursement directly from E-rate versus us paying and then we wait for the reimbursement. So we lowered the expense and the revenue. Then finally, all other revenue was flat. Just a reminder, you know, we could run 1,000 scenarios of what if, but by looking at the sensitivity analysis, it kind of helps us quickly know where something could be going. So for if the CPI changes by 1%, well then that's $680,000 shift for us. So if I guess 2 and it comes in 1.5, well, you know, we're 340. So new property for each $1 million is 17,000. So if I guess 50, it comes in at 51. That's plus 17. And then prorating, boy, that's a word I'm almost becoming obsolete with the state of Illinois. They are not prorating like they used to. So far, evidence-based funding's not been prorated, but if it did, it would cost us about $75,000 if they did some kind of proration. They have been prorating some MCATs, but not evidence. Okay, expenditures. Salaries and benefits are estimated per board contracts. Textbooks, we put together a 5-year plan for those, and we did need some additional funds, up $173,000. Tuition, special ed tuition for private placement and District 843, up 3%. Electric and gas up 3%. Capital expenditures up $225,000, bringing that to a $4 million total is what we have budgeted going forward. Workers' comp up by 3%, and then there's various other changes. I outlined those in your board report. So here's the first look of the results. So based on all those aforementioned variables, we're looking at about a $3.5 million surplus in 2021. Board policy states that we need to accumulate at least 3% each year. So the red line is our estimate of where we should be. So you can see under the model we're above where the district's board policy would be. Here you can see fund balance wise, we're running ahead of our target. This here is in your backup material because it is very small, but you can see here our percentages running, and then there's the percent of fund balance. So, and this just graphically estimates the best possible for our fund balance and our estimated cash flow point. This is very much an estimate. It does track somewhat, but it's not exact. So, with that being said, ending the results, you can see here's our board goals, running to by 2026, we want to be at 33%. We're definitely on target to make that. With all that being said, to that end, district administration is considering program enhancements that will be discussed with the board at a future time.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? Means we're working on things such as could be one-to-one computing, could be things to help with our lower end students. So we see we have some space in the budget forecast to look at some program enhancements that we would bring forward to the board to approve.
More expense.
What's that?
Like more expense.
Yes, with funding.
Yeah.
With funding
From the
Yes.
surplus.
yes.
Always up for discussion. Okay, worst case scenario. All right. First off, worst case scenario, we're going to adjust our tax levy to reflect the possible freeze, property tax freeze. And then there's been a little more excitement and discussion in Springfield about possible pension shift. So we wanted to look at that also. We combined them both into one scenario. So as you know, then what we do is this current proposed state law just simply puts on a 0 in the P-TEL, so that would replace our consumer price index. And then there's the resulting graph. Here you can see we would be pretty close in fiscal year 2021 in meeting policy 420. I will note though, even though not meeting policy 420 without making any reductions, we were still projecting a balanced budget. We would still have a small surplus. Of course, with the impact of the cumulative lock of that 2-year property tax freeze, which we would never be able to make back up, it does bring it difficult. Now, there's also discussions in Springfield that districts that are 150% or below of adequacy would be exempt from any property tax freeze. Currently, we're 68% adequate according to evidence-based funding. So if that was written into the bill, would not affect us. But you never know how they do it. Finally, here's
How
our.
much of that is the pension freeze versus the?
That's
Which one is causing the most?
It's definitely the taxes.
The taxes.
Let me think here if I've got that written down. The pension shift is not that horrible at 0.25%. I don't know if I put that in here for you, but I'll provide that in a Friday update. But the 0.25% pension shift is not a big number. But yeah, it's the taxes.
And there's discussion of that being included back into the evidence-based funding, so we'll have to see where we go with that.
Right. You're right. So that is one way Springfield has estimated about if they did like a pension shift to make it for the districts with lower spending, they would put in more than maybe the 350 million they've set as a target to put into their each year. So it would spread it down to the lower spending districts. We are tier 2. We're just into tier 2. So anything that affects evidence-based funding is really trickles down to us pretty well. Here's where you can see our fund balance. We would really be stagnating. We wouldn't be gaining on that goal. You can see here, whoops. So there's just the graphic, or the numbers actually running behind the graph. And there's the graph. So you can see we really flatten out, and we would begin to possibly, it's modeling that we could possibly lose a little ground on our TAWs towards the end. But we would certainly be flattening out on the TAWs. Now I mentioned this graph here, both of the graphs do not reflect anything to do with bringing back the money from the health insurance trust. So what would it mean if we had this worst case scenario? Well, these are cumulative reductions, meaning if we make a reduction, it's a reduction that's going to carry forward. So we would need to cut about 0.22% of our budget the first year to make the 3%, then 1.4, and you can see the numbers. That would accumulate as we make those reductions, and that would bring us back up to that 3% surplus. Not a large I mean, it's a large dollar, but it's not a large percentage that we'd have to make any one year. And then some of that could obviously be offset with a different revenue if something was, great. So with that, I would answer questions with the two models.
I would like to see that maybe the next time we do this, with the worst case scenario, when you'd say the percentage of the budget, but what that translates to with the non-fixed, because I mean, obviously, a certain percentage of our budget is fixed every year, right? It's not subject to adjustment. What percentage because right, when you look at it, it's a minute part of the overall budget, but of the part of the budget that we actually have control over, I'd just be interested to see what percentage that would be.
Right.
Hopefully it's not
Oh, so
something
you're,
that
are you,
becomes an issue.
the amount of reduction, you're just going to the goal for each year, even though we're over that percentage, so the dollar amounts, you're using some of the extra surplus we're generating now to offset?
No, what I'm doing to calculate the surplus, the reduction needed, is I'm going to this line, I'm saying, okay, this is the expenditures we would have, what's 3% of those? Well, in that case, we were 209,000 short of making. So then I take, okay, I'm gonna take 209,000 off. So I take 209,000 off this number. Now I take what's 3%, I was $1.4 million short. Then I gotta take $1.4 million and 209 off. I take it off that number, calculate, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a calculation of the 3%, not the cumulative, because we are running ahead of where.
Right, great. Okay.
So it's not taking, for example, okay, we said we're gonna be at 24 and we're at 20 point, well, that's 3%, well, how to be 3%? If I picked a different number, like this one, okay, this one has to be almost 6%, 6.5%. It's not looking at those differences. It's looking at the 3%, which would keep us on the track of that first graph that we were showing. Well, actually, that graph's a little ahead, but it keeps us on the track of the 3%.
Can you go back to the slide where you had the red bar?
For which
For the
scenario?
worst case? Yeah.
For fund balance or revenue?
Yeah.
There. So, now remember, it's cumulative, so there's our 209,000, and we gotta have $1.4 million plus the 209, and the 209, $1.4 million plus, I don't remember the other number off the top of my head. That's the number that then brings us to that gap. Because I assume that these aren't just temporary, one-year reductions. If we're gonna make a reduction and we know we need it.
It's cumulative.
It's cumulative.
Once you make the cut is there.
Yes. Yeah, not just, we'll do this year and it's back next year.
Any, how long have you been providing this for us now? 3 years?
May 16 was my first, even before I started.
3 years. Have you done any back testing?
To see how we're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're
Not at home, I mean, at work.
We're running, we're running better than where we thought we would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So our surpluses have been a little higher than we projected.
even-
Our first estimates, though, did not have the state paying us the full amounts of anything. I mean,
Right.
that's the big.
Well, the single biggest change in all of these, if you remember back in May of 16, evidence-based funding was just a discussion happening, and then all of a sudden, evidence-based funding took off like a jackrabbit and became law, and given our low spending, we were big benefits of evidence-based funding. That's probably the single biggest thing that's brought us. At that end, our expenditures have been lower than projected, so revenue's been higher and expenditures have been lower.
And how about some of the model assumptions you put in where you have the big deltas, like your CPI, EAV, and stuff like that? You back tested what?
Yeah. Well, I can, so like, let's look at this one, I mean, I
You
just know
keep
about
quoting
that.
Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, I know, I hate to admit that, I looked at that too.
I just had to get my dig in.
Huh?
I just had to get my dig.
Yeah, I know. So if you go back several, iterations when we were predicting, probably like in here, we were predicting this at like 2.43. That was based on Wall Street Journal. So, and it turned out being 1.9. The good thing about these is, this 1.9 affects the 2019 tax levy, which is collected in fiscal year 1920 and 2021. So we have about, and this was known in December of 18, so it's about an 18-month, you got that window where we got some adjustments, but yeah, Wall Street Journal is about as good as others.
Do you have any feel as to the legs of those, like, property tax freeze?
Brad and I are gonna attend a meeting next Friday, with area suburban superintendents and business managers. We're hoping to get a little clearer picture. Everything I have heard though, Joe, is it would be connected to your tier and your evidence-based funding and where you're at. And if you're not at 100% or 150% of adequacy, it wouldn't apply to you. Like Brad said, we're not gonna get there. So if that becomes the bill, the other discussion I had was to put the rest of the state on PTEL. Well, we were already on PTEL, so if they did that, they're just limiting the tax increases for the remainder of the state. Collier counties are mostly affected by PTEL, obviously. So those are the two most recent discussions. We'll go to the conference next Friday, and I'll report out that afternoon to what we hear. But my time in Springfield was 2 weeks ago. All the discussions centered around that adequacy model, and the fact that we're so low, I don't think it would impact us. The pension shift, I do believe that's a possibility, but all of its discussion is also that money would be earmarked and come through the evidence-based funding back to the districts. And as Brad said, those districts considered more in need could benefit from that. And so that would not be, it would be a detriment, but it wouldn't be devastating to us. And that's kind of why we're modeling what we are with our surpluses now. We would be able to absorb that, still operate.
So what will be our next steps? We'll continue to monitor everything, and our next step will be back here in March with an updated model, and then that will be the model that will be used to develop the 21 budget. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
10-year capital improvement plan.
Included in the backup materials is the review of the 10-year capital plan. On the first page is just everything that the administration would propose. It comes up to about $4 million. This is based upon what was in our original plan, and then also input from district level administrators and building principals as beginning to determine what they need. And now, as we discussed earlier tonight, the building principals have prioritized a number of capital projects, and we'll be able to build in the out years now based upon some of those priorities and start to develop this plan in addition to the already knowns of the tile removal or parking lots or roofs. But this is where we would have it, and the second document then groups it into bid packages. This was the recommendation of our architects. This was something that I believe it was 2 years ago, the board wanted to see in October prior to going to bid. If there's anything that the board would want bid separately or specifically, now would be the time to kind of bring that to our attention. But this was recommendation of DLA to bundle these bids as presented. Rich, is there anything to add?
I don't have anything to add unless anyone has any questions.
Now, this is basically the green light to go out and go ahead and ask for the engineering and put the specs together, go to the bid process, then we would bring it back to the board for bid. Some of these may come in much higher than we anticipated and may get cut out. But this is based upon our architect's estimates at this time, and it would be our recommendation to go forward with bid. Typically that we would come back in February or March for approval for these summer construction projects that would be included in the following year's budget. So, not looking for formal approval, just any feedback that the board may have at this time before moving forward with engineering. Okay. Good. Thanks, Rich.
Informational items.
Report of the special education, 843 is in your backup material for your review. You don't have to do a formal appointment, so we can talk about that.
FOIA requests.
None to report.
Wow. Yeah. Who knew? Building and grounds.
Building and grounds, once again, in the backup materials, Rich did a really nice job putting together a year-to-year comparison. We are ahead overall in year-to-year. If there's any specific questions, we're happy to answer those.
Community relations.
Once again, in your backup material for your review.
Asset of the month.
Asset of the month for November. I just read it, and now it's going to take my computer a minute to open. Spinning. Here we go. Empowerment, service to others, young person makes service to others and for value. Be a role model to your children by serving others in the school. Include service learning as part of the regular school curriculum. I think we do a pretty good job of that here in the community. Create and publicize service opportunities for youth and for families.
210 advisory.
The 210 advisory did not meet on our regularly scheduled meeting day because of the holiday. We will meet this Monday, the 21st, and we will continue to discuss the AP second semester exams, the cum laude designations, a possible new reading recommendation for freshmen, and continue our discussions on attendance incentives.
Budget calendar for 2021.
Just an update on the budget calendar for this next calendar year. As you know, Brad does a very nice job of staying about 16 months out. Brad, anything to add to that? Just there for the overview.
Same as usual, it's down the roll.
Yeah, very good.
Excellent. Legislative report.
Nothing additional to report at this time.
Superintendent's district report.
I did put a couple of items in the superintendent's district report. There's, as you know, the plan to move forward with one-to-one. We've been piloting with individual classrooms. I met with 5 different superintendents and 1 principal over the last 3 weeks to discuss where we are, next steps, so on and so forth. Brad and I met with a company called Single Path. Single Path has worked with Downers Elementary, Chicago Ridge, Lamont, Leiden, and then Lamont Grade School, Lamont Brown Barrack as well. And what they do, they're not selling the material. The first thing they do is a technology integration assessment. They come in, review our technology plan, but most importantly, they do an infrastructure analysis. So basically, what we have in place, our switches, our networks, our access points, they bring in a team of engineers, and is everything ready to go to handle all the additional devices we want to put on it? Is your bandwidth where it needs to be? They have experience doing this. I think our people have done a wonderful job getting us to this point where we are today, but this is such a massive financial investment. Brad and I believe it would be prudent at this time to get at least that audit, that additional look. It'd be $9,500 for the integration assessment. That's a special service, so we wouldn't need to bid or even necessarily have approval. It works within our budget constraints, but we're gonna move forward with this first step in the technology integration assessment. The other things in there are leadership processes and them actually being a part of the process all the way to handing out the, programming and handing out the device. That'd be $2,500 a month moving forward. I'm not gonna go there yet. I wanna do the 30-day technology integration assessment. I wanna come back to the board in December, particularly during that planning session, with their finalized report of this is where we are and these are potential next steps. They'll also, based upon our tech plan and what we have in place, make a recommendation of time implementation. They worked with Lamont High School for 2.5 years to implement this. They've done this in 15 other school districts in the past 4 or 5 years. As I said, I've talked to a number of superintendents that have utilized them. So our next step is just to get that integration assessment, an outside look, unbiased. They're not selling us the switches. They're not selling us the access points. So that's my thought. Brad, am I missing anything? You ran on the meeting with the company a little bit yet.
They're just consultants.
Consultants, yeah. It's basically like an audit. And I think for, like I said,
Tell us what we need.
Tell us what we need, tell us what we're doing right, tell us what we can improve upon, and then massive commitment. Because once we cross that bridge, there's no going back, and that's an annual investment in the millions. And so, you know, obviously, we're not one-to-one now because of the financial situation we've been in for several years. You know, if we took that $3 million that we were setting aside and put it all towards technology, it makes things easier, but we're still limited, and I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. I also want to see what happens in Springfield in November. I don't anticipate anything bad happening, but you never know. So I think that's our next step right now. Let's see what is next. Yeah, other district business. Anything on other district business?
No. For your review.
Correspondence?
So, sorry.
Oh,
That was, so are you saying you're doing this?
Yeah,
You're
so we're
assessment done?
gonna go ahead and do the assessment. Yeah,
So, somebody comes, so before we send anything out to bid on the capital improvement plan, shouldn't we get the results of that back? And
Yeah.
put that, if that's gonna be a priority,
Yeah.
or we decide it's gonna be a priority, I don't think the tech budget's gonna be able to handle much of the improvements.
Well, Chris, a lot of that is what we already kind of had, that line over.
No, I
the
know,
top.
and, yeah, I mean, I think this is a good thing, and I know we've been updating this, everything, but, I mean, if you need something large, you're gonna have to kind of prioritize it, I think.
We will, we'd have to cut something out. But I don't anticipate anything large, our bandwidth is improved, so that's where that, in the next 60 days, we have to determine what that additional amount is going to be. We've built in additional personnel, possibly. We've even talked about the price of devices and how much it will actually cost each parent. But the biggest thing now is just to make sure all of our infrastructure is ready. But yeah, there's a possibility it could take up an additional $1 million. I don't anticipate that, but I think that's why we'll know in November. Correspondence? Just the IASB memo for October is provided as additional correspondence. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session to consider the sale and purchase of securities, investments, or investment contracts and litigation.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
And then I would recommend that we ask for this room, 5 minutes, so board can just stay in place. It's not a long closed session. We have a couple of informational items. There would be no action after closed session, so it'd be my recommendation that we go to closed session, begin the closed session at 9:35. In this room. The information is on the device. And then we'll open the door back up when closed session is complete.
All in favor?
All in favor?